The morning sun was bright and warm as it streamed through the tall glass windows of First National Bank. The building stood in the heart of downtown, with its marble floors and high ceilings that made everyone feel small when they walked inside. It was the kind of place that smelled like money and important papers. The kind of place where people spoke in quiet voices and wore their best clothes. A young girl pushed through the heavy glass doors, followed closely by her grandmother. The girl was 16 years old with her hair pulled back neatly in a ponytail. She wore her school uniform, a crisp white shirt and navy blue skirt with the school crest visible on her blazer pocket. Her shoes were polished until they shined. In her hands she carried a brown folder, holding it carefully like it contained something precious. Her grandmother walked beside her with slow, steady steps. She was a woman in her late 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She wore a simple but elegant dress and a pearl necklace that had belonged to her own mother. Her purse hung from her arm and she held her head high with quiet dignity. She had been a teacher for 40 years before she retired, and she still carried herself with that same patient confidence. The girl looked around the bank with wide eyes. She had been to banks before, but never for something like this. Never for something so important. Her heart beat a little faster as she took in the scene. There were other customers standing in line, some typing on their phones, others shuffling through papers. Security guards stood near the entrance, watching everyone who came and went. Tellers sat behind a long counter, separated from the customers by thick glass windows. The grandmother placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder and gave her an encouraging smile. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly. "Let's go open that account." They joined the line, standing behind a man in a business suit who was depositing a large check. The girl clutched her folder tighter, feeling both excited and nervous. Inside that folder was her future. Inside were letters that could change her entire life. She had worked so hard for those letters. Countless hours of studying late into the night. Weekends spent at the library instead of hanging out with friends. Extra credit assignments and advanced classes that made her brain hurt, but filled her with pride. The grandmother noticed her granddaughter's nervous energy and squeezed her shoulder gently. "You earned this," she whispered. "You have every right to be here." The girl nodded, feeling a little braver. She thought about all the times her grandmother had helped her with homework, sitting at the kitchen table long after dinner was finished. She thought about how her grandmother had driven her to academic competitions on Saturdays, waiting patiently for hours just to give her a ride home. She thought about how proud her grandmother had been when that first scholarship letter arrived in the mail. Finally, it was their turn. The man in the business suit finished his transaction and walked away. A teller behind the glass looked up and made eye contact with them. She was a middle-aged woman with blonde hair styled in perfect waves. Her makeup was carefully applied, and she wore a crisp white blouse with a scarf tied elegantly around her neck. Her name tag read "Employee," but the girl was too nervous to catch the actual name. The grandmother guided her granddaughter forward, and they approached the window together. The teller had been smiling at the previous customer, but now her expression changed slightly. It was subtle, almost invisible, but the girl noticed it. The smile became smaller, more forced. The friendly warmth in the teller's eyes seemed to cool just a bit. The girl tried not to let it bother her. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe the teller was just tired. Maybe she had been standing there too long and her feet hurt. The girl had learned not to always assume the worst about people. "Good morning," the girl said politely, her voice clear and respectful. "I would like to open a college savings account, please." The teller looked at her for a long moment, then glanced at the grandmother, then back at the girl. "A college savings account?" she repeated as if the word sounded strange coming from this particular person. "Yes, ma'am," the girl continued, opening her folder carefully. "I received my first scholarship check and I want to deposit it. My grandmother and I thought it would be good to open a special account for all my college expenses." The girl pulled out a check from the folder. It was an official check, printed on thick paper with a university seal in the corner. The amount was clearly visible, more money than the girl had ever seen with her own name on it. Her hands trembled slightly as she slid it under the glass window toward the teller. The teller picked up the check, holding it between two fingers as if it might be dirty. She examined it without saying anything for several long seconds. The girl waited, her smile starting to feel frozen on her face. The grandmother stood quietly beside her, But there was a tension in her posture now, a slight stiffening of her spine. "This is quite a lot of money," the teller said finally, looking up at the girl with raised eyebrows. Her tone was not congratulatory. It was suspicious. "Yes, ma'am," the girl replied, trying to keep her voice steady and proud. "It's my scholarship for next year. For tuition and books and housing." The teller set the check down on her desk and folded her hands in front of her. "A scholarship," she said slowly. "And which school is this from?" The girl felt a small flutter of unease in her stomach, but she pushed it away. "State University," she answered. "I was accepted early admission. I also have acceptance letters from 2 other schools if you need to see them." She reached for her folder again, ready to show all her documents. She had brought everything just to be prepared. Her grandmother had taught her to always be thorough, to always have more proof than necessary. "It never hurts to be over-prepared," her grandmother had told her, but the teller did not seem interested in seeing more papers. Instead, she leaned back in her chair slightly, creating more distance between herself and the window. "College," she said. And there was something in her voice now, something the girl could not quite name but definitely did not like. "That's quite an ambition." The grandmother's hand tightened slightly on her granddaughter's shoulder. The girl could feel the tension radiating from her grandmother's touch. But the older woman said nothing yet, waiting to see where this conversation would go. The girl did not understand why the teller's words felt wrong. "Thank you," she said, because she did not know what else to say. She had been taught to be polite always, even when things felt uncomfortable. The teller picked up the check again, holding it up to the light as if checking for watermarks or signs of forgery. Other customers in line behind them were starting to shift impatiently. Someone coughed. Someone else checked their watch. But the teller seemed in no hurry. She examined that check as if she had all the time in the world. The girl glanced at her grandmother, whose face remained calm, but whose eyes had grown harder. The older woman had seen this before many times in many different forms. She had hoped her granddaughter would not have to experience it. Not here, not today, not on such an important and happy occasion. But she knew better than to be surprised. The teller finally set the check down again and typed something into her computer, her long fingernails clicking against the keys. She stared at the screen for what felt like forever. The teller looked up from her computer screen, and her eyes moved slowly from the girl to her grandmother and back again. There was something calculating in that gaze, something that made the girl feel like she was being measured and found lacking. The warmth of the morning sunshine coming through the window suddenly felt very far away. "So," the teller began, leaning forward slightly, "you're saying you plan to attend college?" She emphasized the word plan in a way that made it sound like a question, like a doubt, like something that needed to be proven. The girl blinked, confused by the question. "Yes, ma'am. That's why I'm here, to open a college savings account for my scholarship money." "I see," the teller said, but her tone suggested she did not see at all. She picked up the scholarship check again, turning it over in her hands as if the back might reveal some secret the front had hidden. "And this scholarship, what kind of school gave you this?" The girl felt her confusion growing. What kind of question was that? "State University," she repeated, slower this time. "It's one of the best schools in the region. They have an excellent program for what I want to study." "Which is?" the teller asked, her eyebrows raised high on her forehead. "Biology," the girl answered. "I want to become a doctor someday. A pediatrician specifically. I love working with children." The teller made a small sound, something between a hum and a laugh, but not quite either. "A doctor," she repeated flatly. "That's quite a goal." The grandmother shifted her weight, and when she spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "My granddaughter has worked very hard for her achievements. She graduated at the top of her class, I'm sure," the teller said, but there was no conviction in her words. She set the check down and began typing on her computer again, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "It's just that we need to verify these things. You understand? There's a lot of fraud these days." The girl felt her face grow warm. Fraud? Was this woman suggesting that her scholarship was fake? That she had somehow forged official university documents? The thought was so absurd it almost made her laugh. But the laughter died in her throat when she saw the serious expression on the teller's face. "I assure you everything is legitimate," the grandmother said, her voice growing slightly harder around the edges. "Those are official documents from the university. You can call them if you have concerns." The teller did not look at the grandmother when she responded. She kept her eyes on her computer screen. "We have procedures we have to follow," she said. "I'm sure you understand." But the girl did not understand. She had been to this bank before with her grandmother. She had watched other customers deposit checks, open accounts, conduct business. None of them had been questioned like this. None of them had been treated with this kind of suspicion. She thought about the man in the business suit who had been ahead of them in line. The teller had smiled at him warmly, had processed his large check without a single question about fraud or verification. The teller clicked her tongue against her teeth and shook her head slowly as she stared at her screen. "This amount just seems quite substantial," she said, loud enough that people nearby could hear. "Are you certain this is legitimate? Sometimes these scholarship programs they can be misleading." The girl felt something hot rise up in her chest, something that felt like anger, but also like hurt. "I worked very hard for this scholarship," she said, and she heard her voice shake slightly despite her best efforts to keep it steady. "I maintained a 4.0 grade point average all through high school. I took advanced placement courses. I did volunteer work at the hospital and the community center. I earned this." The teller finally looked directly at her, and there was something in that look that made the girl's skin prickle with discomfort. "Of course," the teller said, but the words were empty. "It's just that we have to be careful. You have to understand our position." "What position is that exactly?" the grandmother asked, and now there was no mistaking the steel in her voice. Other customers were definitely paying attention now. The girl could feel their eyes on her back, could hear the whispers starting. The teller's cheeks flushed slightly pink, but she did not back down. Instead, she pushed forward as if determined to make her point. "Look," she said, arranging her face into what was probably meant to be a sympathetic expression but came across as condescending. "I'm just trying to help. Maybe you should consider a more basic checking account, something simpler, something more realistic for someone in your situation." The girl felt the words hit her like a slap. Someone in her situation. What did that mean? Someone young? Someone in a school uniform? Or was the teller talking about something else entirely? Something she was not saying out loud but that hung in the air between them like smoke. "My situation?" the girl repeated quietly. The grandmother placed both hands on the counter, leaning forward. Her voice was controlled but powerful. "My granddaughter has 3 college acceptance letters, 3, and full academic scholarships to each one. She scored in the 99th percentile on her college entrance exams. She has been recognized by the National Merit Scholarship Program. She volunteers 15 hours a week at the Children's Hospital while maintaining perfect grades. Please explain to me what about her situation makes a college savings account unrealistic." The teller's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For a moment she seemed at a loss for words, but then she recovered, her face hardening. "There's no need to get defensive," she said, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "I'm simply following bank policy. We have to ask these questions of everyone." But the girl knew that was not true. She had been watching. She had seen how the teller treated other customers. The warm smiles, the easy conversations, the quick processing of transactions without all these questions and doubts and implications. The teller pulled the scholarship letter from the folder without asking permission, holding it up to examine it more closely. She squinted at the university seal, at the signature at the bottom, at the official letterhead. "This amount really does seem quite high," she announced, loudly enough that several other customers turned to look. "How do I know this is real? Anyone could print something like this at home on their computer." The girl felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not cry. She would not give this woman the satisfaction of seeing how much her words hurt. She had faced doubters before, teachers who thought she was cheating because her test scores were too high, classmates who assumed she only got good grades because of special treatment, people who looked at her and made assumptions based on nothing but the color of her skin. But she had never expected this. Not here. Not when she was trying to do something responsible and adult. Not when she was trying to save money for her future. The grandmother's jaw tightened and the girl could see a muscle working in her cheek. "That is an official document from the State University Scholarship Committee," she said slowly, pronouncing each word carefully. "If you have doubts about its authenticity, I suggest you call the university directly. The phone number is printed right there at the top of the letter." The teller ignored her and turned back to the girl. Have you really thought this through? She asked, her voice taking on a tone that might have been meant to sound caring but came across as patronizing. College isn't for everyone, you know. It's very difficult, very expensive. Even with a scholarship, there are other costs. Books, housing, food. Have you considered other options? Other options? The girl repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, the teller said, nodding as if she was being helpful. Technical school, perhaps. Or a certificate program, something more practical. Something where you could start working right away instead of spending 4 years in classrooms. Are you really college material? Have you thought about whether you're ready for that kind of academic challenge? The grandmother stood up straighter, her full height suddenly seeming much taller. Excuse me? She said, and her voice could have frozen fire. The teller seemed to realize she had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, she doubled down on her position. She held up the scholarship letter higher, practically waving it in the air like evidence in a courtroom. I'm just saying, she continued, her voice growing louder, that this amount seems quite substantial for someone like you. Someone like you. The words hung in the air like a bad smell. The girl felt her whole body go tense. Her grandmother's hand found hers and squeezed it tightly. Around them, the bank had gone quieter. Other customers were no longer pretending not to listen. They were openly staring now, watching the scene unfold like it was a television drama. What exactly do you mean by someone like me? The girl asked, finding courage she did not know she had. Her voice was soft but clear, cutting through the quiet of the bank lobby. The teller's face flushed deeper red, but she lifted her chin defensively. I didn't mean anything by it, she said quickly, too quickly. I'm just trying to be realistic here. The university system is very competitive, very demanding. I'm simply suggesting that you might want to consider whether this is really the right path for you. The grandmother let go of her granddaughter's hand and placed both palms flat on the counter. When she spoke, her voice was teacher-firm, the voice that had commanded respect from thousands of students over 4 decades. My granddaughter, she said slowly and clearly, has a 4.0 grade point average, perfect. Not a single B in 4 years of high school. She has taken 12 advanced placement courses and scored 5s on every single exam. She is ranked number 1 in her graduating class of 342 students. She has been accepted to 3 universities with full scholarships. Full scholarships. So I will ask you again, what exactly do you mean by someone like her? The teller's mouth opened and closed several times. She set the scholarship letter down on the counter, but her hand lingered on it possessively, as if she still had the right to question its validity. I'm not trying to offend anyone, she said, but her tone was defensive rather than apologetic. I'm just doing my job. We have protocols about large deposits. We have to verify things. It's nothing personal, but it felt personal. It felt very personal. The girl had never experienced anything quite like this before. Not so blatantly, not so publicly. She had faced microaggressions, small slights, lowered expectations. But this was different. This woman was standing in front of her, in a professional setting, questioning not just the validity of her scholarship, but her very right to have earned it. The teller picked up the letter again, this time examining it even more closely. Holding it up to the fluorescent lights overhead, she turned it over, looked at the back, then turned it back around. The paper quality seems odd, she muttered, more to herself than to them. And this seal, it could be photocopied. The girl felt her hands begin to shake. She clasped them together tightly to stop the trembling. That is an original document, she said, her voice stronger now, fueled by indignation. It was mailed directly to me from the university. There is a watermark in the paper if you look closely. There is a raised seal. These are security features specifically designed to prevent forgery. The teller barely glanced at her. Anyone can buy special paper these days, she said dismissively. The internet has made it very easy to create official-looking documents. A man in line behind them cleared his throat loudly. A woman whispered something to her companion. The girl could feel the weight of all those eyes on her back. All those strangers watching her be humiliated, watching her credentials be questioned, watching her dreams be treated as suspicious. The grandmother's voice cut through the tension like a knife. I would like to speak with your supervisor now. The teller's head snapped up. For the first time, something like concern flashed across her face. That's really not necessary, she said quickly. I'm sure we can work this out. I'm just following procedure. This is not procedure. the grandmother said, her voice ringing with authority. This is discrimination. This is disrespect. And I will not stand here and watch my granddaughter be treated this way. Get your supervisor, immediately. The teller's face went from red to pale. She glanced around nervously as if hoping someone might come to her rescue. But her co-workers at the other windows were suddenly very busy with their own customers, eyes carefully averted. The security guard near the door shifted uncomfortably but did not move. Look, the teller said, trying a different approach. Her voice became almost wheedling, pleading. I'm trying to help you here. I'm trying to protect you from making a mistake. College is hard. Really hard. And it's expensive, even with financial aid. What if you fail out? What if you can't handle the coursework? Wouldn't it be better to have a backup plan? Something more practical? The girl felt something inside her snap. All the politeness her grandmother had raised her with. All the patience and grace she had been taught to show even in difficult situations. All of it threatened to crack apart. I have never failed at anything academic in my entire life, she said, and her voice was shaking, but not with fear anymore. It was shaking with anger, with hurt, with frustration at having to justify her existence to this stranger. I have worked harder than anyone I know. I have sacrificed social life and sleep and fun to achieve my goals. I earned these scholarships. I earned my acceptance letters. And I do not need your permission or your approval to pursue my education. The teller's face hardened. The fake concern melted away, replaced by something uglier. There's no need to get emotional, she said coldly. I'm just being practical. The statistics show that many scholarship students drop out, especially students from certain backgrounds. I'm trying to save you from disappointment. Certain backgrounds, the grandmother repeated, and her voice was dangerous now, quiet and sharp like broken glass. What backgrounds would those be? The teller realized her mistake too late. She tried to backtrack, stumbling over her words. I just meant, first-generation college students, students who don't have family support, students who might not be prepared for the academic rigor. My granddaughter has all the family support in the world, the grandmother said, and I was a teacher for 40 years. I think I know something about academic rigor. My daughter, this girl's mother, is a nurse. Her father is an engineer. We are an educated family, a hardworking family, a family that values achievement. So tell me, what exactly about my granddaughter's background concerns you? The teller's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked desperately toward the back offices, as if willing someone to come save her from this conversation. Her hands twisted together nervously, and she set the scholarship letter down as if it had burned her fingers. Maybe, she said, her voice taking on a sharp edge, you're just getting ideas above your station. Not everyone is meant for university. Some people are better suited for other kinds of work. Technical work. Service work. There's no shame in that. The girl felt tears burning in her eyes now, hot and angry. Ideas above her station. As if there was a station, a place where she belonged, a ceiling above which she was not permitted to rise. As if her dreams were too big, too ambitious, too much for someone who looked like her. Get your supervisor, the grandmother said again. And this time her voice was ice. Right now, or I will walk to those offices myself and find them. The teller rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes, as if this was all such an inconvenience. She muttered something under her breath that sounded like, people these days, or so sensitive, or maybe something worse. The girl could not quite hear it, but she saw the dismissive gesture, the contemptuous curl of the teller's lip. Other customers were shifting uncomfortably now. A few had pulled out their phones, perhaps recording, perhaps just scrolling nervously. One older woman looked sympathetic, her face sad. A younger man shook his head in disgust, though whether at the teller or at the grandmother's demands, the girl could not tell. The teller finally reached for her phone with exaggerated slowness, making it clear through every movement that she thought this was all unnecessary drama. Fine, she said. I'll call management. But I'm just doing my job, following bank policy. If you want to make a big deal out of nothing, that's your choice. The teller pressed a button on her phone and spoke in a low voice. Her back half turned as if she did not want the girl and her grandmother to hear what she was saying. But they could hear snippets anyway. Customer complaint and being difficult and getting upset over standard procedure. The grandmother's jaw clenched tighter with each phrase, but she said nothing. She simply stood there, tall and dignified, one hand resting protectively on her granddaughter's shoulder. The girl tried to steady her breathing. She tried to remember everything her grandmother had taught her about keeping your composure in difficult situations, about maintaining your dignity when others tried to strip it away, about standing firm in your truth even when people questioned it. But it was hard. So hard. Her hands still trembled slightly, and she kept them clasped tightly in front of her, holding onto her precious folder like it was a life raft. Around them, the bank seemed to have frozen in time. The other tellers at their windows were processing transactions in slow motion, their eyes flickering toward the scene every few seconds. The security guard had moved closer, though he did not seem threatening, just watchful. The customers in line had grown quiet, creating a bubble of tense silence around the unfolding drama. Then there was movement from the back of the bank. A door opened, the one marked private, that led to the offices beyond the public area. A woman emerged and the girl noticed her immediately. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a navy blue suit that was professional but elegant, the kind of outfit that said she was important without having to announce it. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked, the sound sharp and purposeful. The woman's eyes swept across the lobby, taking everything in with a single glance. The teller standing rigid at her window. The grandmother and granddaughter at the counter, one defiant and one holding back tears. The other customers watching with varying expressions of curiosity and discomfort. The woman's face revealed nothing, but there was something alert in her gaze, something intelligent and assessing. She reached the teller window, and the girl could see her nameplate now. Branch Manager. The title was engraved on a small gold pin attached to her suit jacket. The manager was younger than the girl had expected, maybe in her late 30s or early 40s. There were small lines around her eyes that suggested someone who smiled often, though she was not smiling now. Her expression was neutral, professional, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. "Good morning," the manager said, and her voice was calm and warm, the kind of voice that immediately made you feel like someone was actually listening. "I'm the branch manager here. I understand there's been some kind of issue?" The teller immediately launched into an explanation, her words tumbling out fast and defensive. "I was just trying to follow protocol, trying to verify the documents, and they got upset. I was just doing my job, asking the standard questions about fraud prevention, and they demanded to speak with you. I don't think I did anything wrong. I was just being thorough." The manager held up one hand gently, politely, but the gesture was enough to stop the teller mid-sentence. "I appreciate that," she said, her tone still friendly, but carrying unmistakable authority. "But I'd like to hear from our clients first, if you don't mind." The teller's mouth snapped shut and the girl saw surprise flash across her face. Surprise, and something else. Maybe worry. Maybe the first hint that perhaps she had made a mistake. The manager turned her full attention to the grandmother and the girl. She made eye contact with each of them in turn, really looked at them, not through them or past them, but at them. "I'm very sorry you've had to wait," she said sincerely. "And I'm sorry if your experience here today has been anything less than welcoming. Could you please tell me what happened?" The grandmother took a breath, and when she spoke, her voice was controlled, but the girl could hear the emotion underneath, carefully contained. "My granddaughter came here this morning to open a college savings account. She has received a scholarship from State University and wanted to deposit her first check. Instead of helping her, your employee has spent the last 15 minutes questioning whether the scholarship is real, whether my granddaughter is college material, and suggesting that perhaps she should pursue vocational training instead." The manager's expression did not change much, but something flickered in her eyes. Her gaze moved to the teller, then back to the grandmother, then down to the girl. "I see," she said quietly. "May I see the documents in question?" The girl's hands shook slightly as she opened her folder. She pulled out the scholarship letter, the acceptance letter, her transcript. She had planned to show these with pride, with excitement. Instead, she handed them over, feeling defensive, feeling like she had to prove she deserved to be taken seriously. The manager took the papers carefully, respectfully, treating them like they mattered. The manager's eyes moved across the first page, and the girl watched her face change. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Then her eyes widened just a fraction. She looked up at the girl with what appeared to be genuine surprise, then looked back down at the papers. She flipped through the pages slowly, reading carefully, taking her time. "This is the Presidential Scholarship from State University," the manager said, and her voice carried clearly across the quiet lobby. She was not speaking just to them anymore. She was speaking to everyone in the space, making sure her words were heard. Only 10 students in the entire state receive this honor each year. It's one of the most prestigious academic scholarships available. The girl felt something loosen in her chest. Finally. Finally, someone was seeing what she had worked so hard to achieve. Finally, someone was treating her accomplishments with the respect they deserved. The manager continued reading, flipping to the transcript. A 4.0 grade point average. Advanced placement courses. National Merit Scholar. She looked up at the girl again, and this time there was unmistakable admiration in her eyes. These are exceptional achievements. Truly exceptional. You should be very proud. The girl felt tears threatening again, but this time they were different tears. Relief. Validation. The simple joy of being seen and recognized for what she had actually accomplished rather than being judged for what someone assumed about her. The manager turned to the teller, and her expression changed. The warmth remained, but there was steel underneath it now. Her voice stayed professional, but there was an edge to it that had not been there before. "Could you please explain to me what prompted your line of questioning with this young woman?" The teller stammered, her earlier confidence evaporating like water on hot pavement. We're supposed to verify large deposits. Check for fraud. It's bank policy." "Bank policy," the manager repeated slowly. "And do you verify every scholarship check that comes through this bank? Do you question every student about whether they're really college material?" The teller's face went red. "Well, no, but this amount was quite large, and I just thought—" "You thought what exactly?" the manager interrupted, and though her voice remained calm, there was no mistaking the serious nature of the question. "What about this particular situation made you doubt the validity of these official university documents?" The teller looked around as if searching for support, but found none. Her coworkers were suddenly very interested in their computer screens. The customers in line looked away when she tried to make eye contact. Even the security guard seemed to be studying something very important on the ceiling. "I was just being cautious," the teller said weakly. "You can't be too careful these days." The manager looked at the scholarship letter again, then at the teller. "This document has a raised seal, a watermark, official letterhead. It's clearly authentic. A phone call to the university would have confirmed it in 2 minutes if you had genuine concerns. Instead, you spent 15 minutes suggesting this young woman might be better suited for vocational training?" The manager's voice was still professional, but the disapproval was clear. The teller had no answer. She stood there, red-faced and silent, finally understanding perhaps the gravity of her actions. The manager turned back to the girl and her grandmother, and her expression softened. "I apologize on behalf of this bank for how you've been treated today. This is absolutely not how we conduct business, and it's not reflective of our values or our policies." The manager held the scholarship papers carefully in her hands, looking at them with what seemed like a mixture of respect and recognition. She turned slightly so that others in the lobby could see the documents, as if wanting witnesses to what she was about to say. Her voice carried clearly through the marble-floored space. "The Presidential Scholarship," she said, her words measured and deliberate, "is not just any scholarship. It covers full tuition, room, board, books, and provides a stipend for living expenses for 4 years. The selection process involves multiple rounds of applications, essays, interviews, and academic reviews. Out of thousands of applicants across the entire state, only 10 are chosen." She looked directly at the girl, and there was genuine warmth in her eyes now. "To receive this scholarship means you are not just a good student. It means you are extraordinary. It means a committee of university professors and administrators reviewed your entire academic history and determined you were one of the 10 most promising students in the state." The girl felt her throat tighten with emotion. After all the doubt, all the questions, All the implications that she had somehow cheated or lied or been given something she did not deserve. Here was someone who actually understood what she had achieved. Someone who recognized the weight and significance of what she held in her hands. The manager was not finished. She turned slowly, addressing not just the teller but the entire lobby. This young woman's transcript shows straight A grades in the most challenging courses her school offered. She took college-level classes while still in high school. Her test scores place her in the top 1% nationally. She has letters of recommendation from teachers, from community leaders, from doctors at the hospital where she volunteers. The manager's voice grew stronger, more emphatic. This is not someone whose credentials should be questioned. This is someone who should be celebrated. The grandmother stood a little taller, her hand still on her granddaughter's shoulder, but her grip now one of pride rather than protection. The girl saw tears shimmer in her grandmother's eyes, happy tears this time. Tears of vindication and joy. The manager turned back to the teller, and now her professional mask slipped just slightly, revealing something harder underneath. So I'll ask you again, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. What specifically prompted you to question this young woman's achievements? What made you doubt the authenticity of official university documents? What made you suggest she might be better suited for vocational training rather than university? The silence in the bank was absolute. Even the humming of the computers seemed to quiet. Everyone was listening now, waiting for the answer that they all suspected, but that no one wanted to say out loud. The teller opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I thought, the amount is standard for a presidential scholarship, the manager said calmly. It's the same amount every recipient receives. We've processed several of these scholarships over the years, so that's not it. What else? The teller's face had gone from red to almost purple. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the air conditioning. I was just trying to be helpful, to make sure she understood what she was getting into. College is difficult, and do you give the same advice to every student who comes in to open a college savings account? The manager interrupted. Do you question whether every scholarship recipient is really college material? The teller did not answer. She could not answer, because they all knew the truth. The girl knew it. Her grandmother knew it. The manager clearly knew it. And judging by the uncomfortable shifting and whispered conversations among the other customers, they knew it too. The manager carefully organized the papers, lining them up with precise movements. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but somehow more powerful. I was a first-generation college student, she said, and the girl looked up in surprise. My parents worked in factories. They never finished high school. When I got accepted to university, people questioned whether I belonged there too. Teachers suggested I should maybe just get a job. Guidance counselors said college might be too hard for someone from my background. The manager's eyes found the girl's, and in that moment there was a connection, an understanding that passed between them without words. But I went anyway, she continued. I worked 3 jobs to pay my way through. I studied when everyone else was sleeping. I proved every single doubter wrong. And when I graduated, I promised myself something. I promised that if I ever had the power to help someone else in my position, I would. If I ever saw someone being discouraged or dismissed because of who they were or where they came from, I would speak up. She held the scholarship letter up higher, making sure everyone could see the official seal, the university letterhead, the signatures. This is real, she said clearly. This young woman's achievements are real. Her potential is real. Her dreams are valid, and anyone who suggests otherwise is wrong. The girl felt something break open inside her chest, something that had been locked tight with hurt and humiliation. She had not realized how much she needed to hear those words from someone in authority, someone whose opinion carried weight in this space. She had known her achievements were real, but having someone else declare it, defend it, validate it in front of all these strangers made it feel more solid somehow. The manager turned back to the teller, and now her voice was no longer warm. It was businesslike and firm. I'm going to ask you to step away from your station. Someone from Human Resources will speak with you shortly. The teller's eyes went wide, but I didn't mean anything by it. I was just being cautious. I wasn't trying to— Step away from your station, please, the manager repeated. And this time it was clearly not a request. The teller looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would come to her defense. But her co-workers kept their eyes averted. The customers in line were silent. Even the security guard, who had been watching the whole exchange, simply nodded when the manager glanced his way. With shaking hands, the teller began to gather her things. Her purse from under the counter, her water bottle, the small personal items that had sat on her desk. She moved slowly, as if hoping someone would stop her, would say it was all a misunderstanding, but no one did. The manager stood there calmly, waiting patiently for her to comply. As the teller walked away toward the back offices, her head down, the girl saw her wipe at her eyes. Part of her felt a small twist of sympathy, but then she remembered all the things the teller had said. The doubt, the dismissiveness, the suggestions that she was aiming too high, dreaming too big, getting ideas above her station. The sympathy faded. The manager watched until the teller disappeared through the door marked private. Then she turned back to the girl and her grandmother, and her whole demeanor changed again, softening back into warmth and welcome. "Now," she said with a genuine smile, "let's get you that college savings account opened properly, and I'm going to handle this personally." She gestured toward her office, a glass-walled room at the back of the lobby. "Would you please come with me? I want to make sure you get the very best account options, and I want to personally apologize for this experience." The grandmother nodded, gathering up her purse and her granddaughter. As they walked toward the office, the girl became aware of the other customers watching them. But it felt different now. Before, she had felt like she was on display, being judged and found wanting. Now she felt seen, acknowledged. Several people nodded at them as they passed. One older woman smiled and gave a small thumbs up. A younger man called out softly, "Congratulations on your scholarship." The girl managed a small smile in return. Her hands had stopped shaking. The tight feeling in her chest had eased. She still held her folder carefully, but now it felt like what it was supposed to be. A collection of her achievements, not evidence she had to defend. As they entered the manager's office, the woman held the door open for them, then closed it gently behind her. The space was comfortable and professional, with a large desk, comfortable chairs, and windows that looked out over the city. Framed diplomas hung on the wall. The girl noticed they were from State University, the same school she would be attending in the fall. The manager gestured to two comfortable chairs in front of her desk. "Please sit down," she said warmly. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Tea?" The grandmother shook her head politely. "No, thank you. We just want to finish what we came here to do." "Of course," the manager said, settling into her own chair behind the desk. She pulled out a notepad and pen, then looked directly at the girl. "Before we start the account process, I want to say something to you, and I want you to really hear it." The girl met her eyes, and the manager's expression was serious but kind. "What happened out there," the manager continued, "was completely unacceptable. It should never have happened. And I want you to know that it was not about you. It was not about your qualifications or your achievements or your worth. It was about someone else's biases and assumptions. Do you understand what I'm saying?" The girl nodded slowly. She understood intellectually, but emotionally she still felt bruised, still felt the sting of having to prove herself, still felt the hurt of being questioned. The manager seemed to sense this. "I know it doesn't feel that way right now," she said gently. "I know it feels personal because it happened to you. But I need you to hear this. You did nothing wrong. You are not required to have perfect credentials to be treated with respect. But the fact that you do have perfect credentials, that you have achieved something truly remarkable, makes what happened out there even more egregious." The grandmother reached over and took her granddaughter's hand, squeezing it gently. The manager noticed the gesture and smiled. "You have wonderful support," she said. "That's going to help you as you navigate university and beyond. Because unfortunately, what happened today might not be the last time someone questions you or doubts you, or tries to make you feel like you don't belong. But you do belong. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." The girl felt her eyes fill with tears again, but this time she let them fall. "Thank you," she whispered. The manager pulled a tissue box from her drawer and pushed it across the desk. "Now," she said, her tone becoming more businesslike but still friendly, "let's talk about your account. I'm going to set you up with our premium student account. Normally there are monthly fees, but for presidential scholarship recipients we waive all fees. You'll get free checks, free online banking, free mobile deposits, everything." She began typing on her computer, pulling up forms and account information. We'll deposit this scholarship check today, and it should be available in your account within 2 business days. You'll get a debit card in the mail within a week, and I'm going to give you my direct phone number and email address." The girl looked up in surprise. "Your personal contact information?" "Yes," the manager said firmly, "because I want you to know that you have someone here who supports you. If you ever have any banking needs, any questions, any concerns at all, you can contact me directly. You don't have to go through the regular channels. You call me." She pulled out a business card from her desk drawer and wrote her cell phone number on the back. "I mean that," she said, handing it to the girl. "College is expensive and complicated, even with a full scholarship. You're going to have questions about managing your money, about budgeting, about setting up automatic payments for things. I want to help." The grandmother's eyes glistened with tears. "That's very kind of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Very kind indeed." The manager smiled at her. "I told you I was a first-generation college student too. I know how overwhelming it can be, and I know how important it is to have someone who believes in you." She turned back to her computer and continued processing the account. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, filling in forms, clicking through screens. "I'm also adding a small interest-bearing savings account linked to your checking account. I recommend you automatically transfer a percentage of any money you receive into savings. It's a good habit to start early." The girl watched, fascinated by how different this experience was from what had happened at the teller window. Here she was being treated like an intelligent adult. Her questions were answered thoroughly. Her achievements were respected. The manager explained everything clearly, making sure she understood how her account would work, what fees to watch out for, how to set up online banking. Through the glass walls of the office, the girl could see the bank lobby continuing its normal business. Other customers were being helped at the teller windows. People came and went, but she also noticed that periodically, someone would look toward the office where they sat. Some looks were curious, some were sympathetic. One woman caught the girl's eye and smiled encouragingly. The manager noticed too. "You've made an impression today," she said quietly. "Not for the reason you wanted, but you handled yourself with remarkable dignity. Your grandmother raised you well." The grandmother squeezed her granddaughter's hand again. "She's always made me proud," she said simply. As the manager printed out the account information and had them sign the necessary forms, the girl noticed movement through the glass. The teller from before was being escorted across the lobby by a woman in a gray suit who must have been from Human Resources. They disappeared into another office, the door closing firmly behind them. The manager saw where the girl was looking. "That's going to be dealt with," she said seriously. "We have very clear policies about discrimination and respect for customers. What happened today violated those policies. There will be consequences." "What will happen to her?" the girl asked, not sure how she felt about the answer. The manager considered her words carefully. "That's confidential, but I can tell you that we take these matters very seriously. We'll conduct a full investigation. We'll review whether this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern, and we'll make decisions based on what we find." She handed over a folder with all the account information, cards, and paperwork. "Your account is now active. Your money is safe, and you have everything you need to manage your finances as you prepare for college." The girl took the folder, holding it carefully. It was thicker now, filled not just with her scholarship letters but with bank documents, her new account numbers, her future. "Thank you," she said again. "Really, thank you for everything." The manager stood and they all stood with her. "Before you go," she said, "I have a question for you. Our bank has a community newsletter. We feature local students, local achievements, community success stories. Would you be willing to let us write about your scholarship, about what you've accomplished?" The girl looked at her grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. "It would be nice," the grandmother said, "for people to see the truth, to see what she's really achieved." "I'd like that," the girl said softly. "I think I'd like that very much." The manager smiled broadly. "Excellent. I'll have our communications person reach out to you next week. We'll need photos, a short interview, nothing too invasive. But I think it's important for the community to see young people like you succeeding, to see that hard work and dedication pay off, to see that assumptions about people are often wrong." She walked them to her office door, opening it and stepping out into the lobby with them. As they walked toward the exit, the manager walked with them, her hand lightly on the girl's shoulder in a gesture that felt supportive rather than patronizing. At the door, she shook both their hands formally. "Congratulations on your scholarship," she said to the girl. "And congratulations on raising such an exceptional young woman," she said to the grandmother. The security guard, who had watched the entire morning unfold, opened the door for them. As they passed, he nodded respectfully. "Good luck in college, miss," he said quietly. The girl smiled at him. "Thank you." As they stepped out into the sunshine, the girl took a deep breath of fresh air. The morning felt different now. The world felt different. Yes, something painful had happened. Yes, she had been hurt and humiliated. But she had also been defended. She had been validated. She had been seen for who she really was. Her grandmother put an arm around her shoulders as they walked toward the car. "You okay, baby?" The girl thought about it. Was she okay? She was still processing everything that had happened, still feeling the sting of the teller's words, still replaying the moment when the manager had stood up for her. "I think so," she said finally. "It hurt. But it also taught me something." "What's that?" Her grandmother asked. "That there will always be people who doubt me. But there will also be people who believe in me, and the people who believe in me are the ones who matter." The manager gestured to 2 comfortable chairs in front of her desk. "Please sit down," she said warmly. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Tea?" The grandmother shook her head politely. "No, thank you. We just want to finish what we came here to do." "Of course," the manager said, settling into her own chair behind the desk. She pulled out a notepad and pen, then looked directly at the girl. "Before we start the account process, I want to say something to you, and I want you to really hear it." The girl met her eyes, and the manager's expression was serious but kind. "What happened out there," the manager continued, "was completely unacceptable. It should never have happened. And I want you to know that it was not about you. It was not about your qualifications or your achievements or your worth. It was about someone else's biases and assumptions. Do you understand what I'm saying?" The girl nodded slowly. She understood intellectually, but emotionally she still felt bruised, still felt the sting of having to prove herself, still felt the hurt of being questioned. The manager seemed to sense this. "I know it doesn't feel that way right now," she said gently. "I know it feels personal because it happened to you. But I need you to hear this. You did nothing wrong. You are not required to have perfect credentials to be treated with respect. But the fact that you do have perfect credentials, that you have achieved something truly remarkable, makes what happened out there even more egregious." The grandmother reached over and took her granddaughter's hand, squeezing it gently. The manager noticed the gesture and smiled. "You have wonderful support," she said. "That's going to help you as you navigate university and beyond. Because unfortunately, what happened today might not be the last time someone questions you or doubts you, or tries to make you feel like you don't belong. But you do belong. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." The girl felt her eyes fill with tears again, but this time she let them fall. "Thank you," she whispered. The manager pulled a tissue box from her drawer and pushed it across the desk. "Now," she said, her tone becoming more businesslike but still friendly, "let's talk about your account. I'm going to set you up with our premium student account. Normally there are monthly fees, but for presidential scholarship recipients we waive all fees. You'll get free checks, free online banking, free mobile deposits, everything." She began typing on her computer, pulling up forms and account information. "We'll deposit this scholarship check today, and it should be available in your account within 2 business days. You'll get a debit card in the mail within a week, and I'm going to give you my direct phone number and email address." The girl looked up in surprise. "Your personal contact information?" "Yes," the manager said firmly. "Because I want you to know that you have someone here who supports you. If you ever have any banking needs, any questions, any concerns at all, you can contact me directly. You don't have to go through the regular channels. You call me." She pulled out a business card from her desk drawer and wrote her cell phone number on the back. "I mean that," she said, handing it to the girl. "College is expensive and complicated, even with a full scholarship. You're going to have questions about managing your money, about budgeting, about setting up automatic payments for things. I want to help." The grandmother's eyes glistened with tears. "That's very kind of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Very kind indeed." The manager smiled at her. "I told you I was a first-generation college student too. I know how overwhelming it can be, and I know how important it is to have someone who believes in you." She turned back to her computer and continued processing the account. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard, filling in forms, clicking through screens. I'm also adding a small interest-bearing savings account linked to your checking account. I recommend you automatically transfer a percentage of any money you receive into savings. It's a good habit to start early." The girl watched, fascinated by how different this experience was from what had happened at the teller window. Here she was being treated like an intelligent adult. Her questions were answered thoroughly. Her achievements were respected. The manager explained everything clearly, making sure she understood how her account would work, what fees to watch out for, how to set up online banking. Through the glass walls of the office, the girl could see the bank lobby continuing its normal business. Other customers were being helped at the teller windows. People came and went, but she also noticed that periodically, someone would look toward the office where they sat. Some looks were curious, some were sympathetic. One woman caught the girl's eye and smiled encouragingly. The manager noticed too. "You've made an impression today," she said quietly. "Not for the reason you wanted, but you handled yourself with remarkable dignity. Your grandmother raised you well." The grandmother squeezed her granddaughter's hand again. "She's always made me proud," she said simply. As the manager printed out the account information and had them sign the necessary forms, the girl noticed movement through the glass. The teller from before was being escorted across the lobby by a woman in a gray suit who must have been from Human Resources. They disappeared into another office, the door closing firmly behind them. The manager saw where the girl was looking. "That's going to be dealt with," she said seriously. "We have very clear policies about discrimination and respect for customers. What happened today violated those policies. There will be consequences." "What will happen to her?" the girl asked, not sure how she felt about the answer. The manager considered her words carefully. "That's confidential, but I can tell you that we take these matters very seriously. We'll conduct a full investigation. We'll review whether this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern, and we'll make decisions based on what we find." She handed over a folder with all the account information, cards, and paperwork. "Your account is now active. Your money is safe, and you have everything you need to manage your finances as you prepare for college." The girl took the folder, holding it carefully. It was thicker now, filled not just with her scholarship letters but with bank documents, her new account numbers, her future. "Thank you," she said again. "Really, thank you for everything." The manager stood and they all stood with her. "Before you go," she said, "I have a question for you. Our bank has a community newsletter. We feature local students, local achievements, community success stories. Would you be willing to let us write about your scholarship, about what you've accomplished?" The girl looked at her grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. "It would be nice," the grandmother said, "for people to see the truth, to see what she's really achieved." "I'd like that," the girl said softly. "I think I'd like that very much." The manager smiled broadly. "Excellent. I'll have our communications person reach out to you next week. We'll need photos, a short interview, nothing too invasive. But I think it's important for the community to see young people like you succeeding, to see that hard work and dedication pay off, to see that assumptions about people are often wrong." She walked them to her office door, opening it and stepping out into the lobby with them. As they walked toward the exit, the manager walked with them, her hand lightly on the girl's shoulder in a gesture that felt supportive rather than patronizing. At the door, she shook both their hands formally. "Congratulations on your scholarship," she said to the girl. "And congratulations on raising such an exceptional young woman," she said to the grandmother. The security guard, who had watched the entire morning unfold, opened the door for them. As they passed, he nodded respectfully. "Good luck in college, miss," he said quietly. The girl smiled at him. "Thank you." As they stepped out into the sunshine, the girl took a deep breath of fresh air. The morning felt different now. The world felt different. Yes, something painful had happened. Yes, she had been hurt and humiliated. But she had also been defended. She had been validated. She had been seen for who she really was. Her grandmother put an arm around her shoulders as they walked toward the car. "You okay, baby?" The girl thought about it. Was she okay? She was still processing everything that had happened, still feeling the sting of the teller's words, still replaying the moment when the manager had stood up for her. "I think so," she said finally. "It hurt. But it also taught me something." "What's that?" her grandmother asked. "That there will always be people who doubt me. But there will also be people who believe in me, and the people who believe in me are the ones who matter." 3 weeks had passed since that difficult morning at the bank, and the girl sat in her room surrounded by boxes. College move-in day was just a week away, and her entire life seemed to be in the process of being packed up and reorganized. Clothes sorted into piles, books stacked on her desk, her acceptance letters and scholarship documents carefully filed in a folder that would travel with her. On her dresser sat a copy of the bank's community newsletter that had arrived in the mail yesterday. Her grandmother had already made copies for relatives. Her mother had posted it on the refrigerator. The girl picked it up now, looking at her own photo on the front page. She was smiling in the picture, holding her scholarship letter standing in front of the bank. The headline read, "Local Student Achieves Presidential Scholarship." The article was thoughtful and thorough. It talked about her achievements, her volunteer work, her plans to become a pediatrician. It quoted her grandmother talking about her dedication. It included a statement from the bank manager about the importance of supporting young people in the community. It made no mention of what had happened that day with the teller, but somehow the article felt like a response to it anyway. A correction. A celebration of who she really was. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the bank manager, checking in to see if she had received the newsletter and if she needed anything before starting school. They had texted a few times since that day, always brief but warm messages. The manager had sent her a list of budgeting apps to try, tips for managing student loans even though her scholarship covered most things, advice about building credit early. The girl texted back a thank you, then set her phone down and returned to packing. As she folded clothes into a suitcase, her mind wandered back to that morning. She thought about how scared she had felt, how small, how the teller's words had made her question herself, even though she knew logically that her achievements were real. But she also thought about what came after, the manager's fierce defense, the validation, the public acknowledgement of her accomplishments. And she realized something important. That experience, as painful as it had been, had taught her something valuable. It had shown her that she could face discrimination and come through it, that she could stand up for herself, that she had people who would stand with her. Her grandmother appeared in the doorway carrying a box of supplies they had bought for her dorm room. "How's the packing going?" she asked, setting the box down. "Good," the girl said. "Almost done with clothes. Still need to pack books and school stuff." Her grandmother sat on the edge of the bed looking around at the half-packed room. "Scared?" she asked gently. The girl considered the question. "A little," she admitted, "but also excited. Really excited. That's normal," her grandmother said. "College is a big change, but you're ready for it." "More than ready." The girl sat down next to her grandmother. "Did you ever think when you were young that I'd get a scholarship like this?" Her grandmother smiled. "I always knew you were special. From the time you were little, asking a million questions about everything, reading before you started kindergarten. I knew you'd do great things, but did you think it would be hard?" The girl pressed. "Did you think people would question me? Doubt me?" Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was sad but honest. "Yes," she said simply. "I hoped the world would be different by the time you grew up. I hoped things would be easier for you than they were for me. But I also knew you'd face challenges, face people who wouldn't see your worth right away. That's why I always pushed you to be excellent, not because you needed to prove anything to anyone, but because I wanted you to be so good that even the doubters would have to acknowledge your achievements." The girl leaned against her grandmother's shoulder. "What happened at the bank?" she said softly. "It really hurt." "I know, baby. I know it did. But the manager, the way she stood up for me, that felt really good. It felt like someone saw me. Really saw me." Her grandmother put an arm around her. "There will be more moments like the one with the teller. I wish I could tell you there won't be, but I'd be lying. But there will also be more moments like the one with the manager. People who believe in you, people who support you, people who see your light and want to help it shine brighter." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, dust motes dancing in the light. Finally, the girl straightened up. "I should finish packing," she said. "Need help?" Her grandmother asked. "Actually, yes. Can you help me decide which books to bring and which to leave here?" They spent the next hour sorting through books, laughing over old favorites, debating whether certain textbooks would be useful in college. It felt normal. It felt good. It felt like life moving forward. 4 months later, the girl stood in the same bank, now dressed in jeans and a university sweatshirt. It was Thanksgiving break, and she was home for the holidays. She had come to the bank to deposit a check from her part-time campus job and to make a withdrawal for holiday shopping. The bank looked the same, but also different. There were new faces at the teller windows, new posters on the walls advertising services. But the marble floors were still shiny, the ceiling still high. The whole place still had that important, official feeling. She had specifically come at a time when she knew the manager would be there. As she entered, she saw the familiar figure in the glass office at the back talking on the phone. The manager looked up, saw her, and broke into a huge smile. She held up one finger in a wait 1 minute gesture. The girl got in line at a teller window, choosing one with a young woman she had not seen before. When her turn came, the transaction was smooth and quick. No questions, no doubts, just efficient professional service. The kind of service everyone should receive every time. As she finished, she felt a hand on her shoulder. The manager stood beside her, smiling warmly. "I thought that was you I saw come in," she said. "How's college? How's your first semester going?" "It's amazing," the girl said, and she meant it. "Hard but amazing. My biology class is everything I hoped it would be. And I joined the pre-med society, and I'm volunteering at the university hospital on weekends." "That's wonderful," the manager said, genuine pride in her voice. "I'm so glad it's going well. Do you have a few minutes? Come sit in my office and tell me about it." They walked back to the glass-walled office together, and the girl noticed a few things were different. There was a new photo on the desk, the manager with what looked like her family, and on the wall was a framed copy of the newsletter featuring the girl's scholarship story. "You kept it," the girl said, pointing to the frame. "Of course," the manager said. "It reminds me why I do this job. It reminds me what's important." She gestured to a chair and the girl sat down. They talked for 20 minutes about college life, about classes and dorm food and making new friends. The manager asked intelligent questions and gave good advice about time management and handling stress. Finally, the girl glanced at her watch. "I should go. My grandmother is waiting in the car. We're supposed to go shopping." "Of course," the manager said, standing. "But before you go, I want to show you something." She walked to her file cabinet and pulled out a folder. "After what happened with you, we implemented new training for all staff. Diversity training, sensitivity training, anti-bias workshops. Everyone in the bank had to complete it." The girl looked at the documents in the folder. Training materials, completion certificates, a new bank policy explicitly prohibiting discrimination and requiring respectful treatment of all customers regardless of race, age, or background. "You did that because of what happened to me?" the girl asked. "We did it because it should have been done a long time ago," the manager said. "But yes, what happened to you was the catalyst. It forced us to examine our practices, our culture, our blind spots, and we're better for it." The girl felt emotion rise in her throat. Something that had been so painful, so humiliating, had created positive change, not just for her, but for everyone who would come after her. "What happened to the teller?" she asked. She had wondered but never felt comfortable asking before. The manager's face grew serious. "She no longer works here. She was given the option to attend extensive retraining or to resign. She chose to resign." The manager paused, then added, "I don't take pleasure in that. I wish she had chosen to learn and grow. But I also know that her presence here would have continued to harm people. Sometimes consequences are necessary." The girl nodded slowly. She did not feel happy about the woman losing her job, but she also did not feel sorry. Actions had consequences. Bias had consequences. Treating people poorly had consequences. "I should get going," she said, standing up. The manager walked her to the door of the office. "Keep me updated on how school is going, and when you graduate, I want to know. We might have internship opportunities for someone with your drive and intelligence." "Really?" the girl asked, surprised. "Really," the manager said. "You're exactly the kind of person we want in this industry. Intelligent, hardworking, dedicated to serving people. When you're ready, we'd love to have you." They walked together to the bank exit. As they reached the door, the manager gave her a quick hug. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Keep making us proud." The girl stepped out into the cold November air, pulling her coat tighter around her. Her grandmother was waiting in the car, the engine running to keep the heat on. As the girl climbed into the passenger seat, her grandmother looked at her with questioning eyes. "Everything good?" she asked. "Everything's perfect," the girl said, buckling her seatbelt. "The manager says they changed all their policies because of what happened. and she offered me an internship after I graduate. Her grandmother smiled, a knowing, satisfied smile. "That's good," she said. "That's real good. You turned something negative into something positive." As they drove away, the girl looked back at the bank through the car window. That building, that place, had been the site of one of the worst experiences of her young life. But it had also been where someone had stood up for her, where someone had seen her worth and defended it, where she had learned that she could face adversity and come through stronger. Years later, after graduating with honors, after completing medical school, after starting her residency in pediatrics, the girl, now a young woman, a doctor, would return to that same bank. She would open her first professional account, the one where her attending physician's salary would be deposited, and the same manager, now a regional director overseeing multiple branches, would personally handle her business. They would sit in that same glass office, older but still connected by that morning years ago when everything had changed, and they would talk not just about banking but about life, about the journey, about how far they had both come. "You know," the manager would say, looking at the young doctor with pride, "I think about that day sometimes, about what could have happened if I hadn't been here, if I hadn't seen what was going on, if I hadn't stepped in." And the young doctor would smile and say, "But you were here. You did see. You did step in." And that made all the difference, because sometimes all it takes is one person willing to speak up, one person willing to stand between cruelty and its target, one person willing to say, "This is wrong and I won't allow it." One person can change everything. And both of them, sitting in that office years later, understood that truth deeply. They had lived it. They had proved it. They had become it. The girl who had been doubted became a doctor who saved lives. The manager who had defended her became a leader who changed systems. And the story that had started with discrimination and pain ended with growth and hope, and the promise of a better future. That is how change happens, one person at a time, one moment at a time, one act of courage at a time. And it all began on a bright morning when a young girl walked into a bank with nothing but her dreams and her dignity, and someone chose to honor both.